Images, the whole story of an image is worth 1,000 words, and a 30-second video is apparently in one research is close to 8 million words. The reality is that you can also get information from images, depending on how they've been labeled, depending on where they were taken, depending on who released them. Information in the form of images can help you shape your opinion, your information, your updates. And more often than not, if you do it right and it's a certain event, what you will find, and in this instance we've used the London riots, is more information and more cross-section of what was happening on both sides is coming out from social media. And when was the last time you watched a news report and they didn't have a cross-section, a YouTube clip, or they didn't have a tweet, or they didn't have join us on Facebook? The news services understand this. The news services are harvesting from here as well. Businesses don't do it very well, but it is a great open source means of validating and confirming. If someone's saying that the entire neighborhoods are shut down and this is burnt down, and you can see photos that were uploaded from 50 different sources in the last 30 seconds and it's just not true, it gives you a better sense of how to make your decisions, both from a crisis or a travel or a business and business continuity perspective. Location-based services and near-field communications, I touched on this briefly before. Foursquare, Google Latitude, Facebook Places, Google+. All of these sorts of things now are increasingly enabling us to be GPSed. So your global positioning systems, you can now use that as a means of, you can have guard zones or a geo-fenced area. When you go to a certain area, it reminds you to do something. When you land at an airport, it checks for your status. In a crisis, you can turn everybody's phones on and now you can see where they are. Much of this is free and available. A lot of organizations spend a lot of time, money and effort on expensive systems when a lot of their employees are already on one or more of these free systems. They just don't know how they work. They don't encourage it. They don't integrate. And as a result, they have a significant amount of lost opportunity. Or it gets to a point where the scale is just untenable and there's just too many people, too many solutions, and they're completely overwhelmed. And they're not able to, on an ad hoc basis, create and formulate these networks. But they are great tools. Foursquare is equally as much about communities and tribes and checking in and sharing information as any other crisis management tool available. Google Latitude and Facebook and Places and the rest of them can also be a means of recovery and validation and identifying where a vanishing point, if someone's gone missing or they're not well and all those sorts of things, you can trace and check their social profiles based on their activities. The caveat with this, and the thing to remember from a travel safety and security perspective, is a lot of people will change their phone number and get local SIM cards or turn off some of the data processes because the costs are just too prohibitive. So again, don't bet the farm on it, because there may be minority instances or there may be people and certain occasions where it just doesn't work because of those mitigating processes. So how do you manage this? I've talked a lot about these tools and the processes and things to consider, but it really comes down to management. And this is a 24/7 process. And increasingly, it's not just 24/7, it's 60/24/7. It's every second of every minute of every hour of every day, because increasingly from a travel and a business and an international standpoint, that's your exposure. So what we're going to talk about is geo-arbitrage, the metrics that you put in place, how to determine breakouts, crisis management teams, technical inputs, and how to best go about this. So from a purely defensive plan, that is that you have too many rules and regulations, you've got nothing in place, and this has been forced upon you and you're about to face, or you're in a crisis right now, focus on content. The creation of a message. That message is what you want or need to communicate. It needs to be in the form of video, images, articles, press release. You need to be able to self-publish and or go through providers. And I'm not talking the traditional PR companies that charge an arm and a leg and in the next 48 hours you'll get this, or you'll get a 30-second slot on the next morning show. That's not it. You need immediate access to social networks. You need immediate access to various forms of content distribution channels, because you're up against everybody else who's got their own version of the truth. You have to either inject into those channels, dominate those channels, or at least be heard with your opinion, good, bad, or otherwise. This is not a duplicitous statement to help you cheat the system, but in order to get your message out, waiting for the next news update, waiting for the next news publication will not work. And in that time, your business could have already lost significant value. You could have lost lives. You could have lost resources. A whole bunch of negative things could have transpired in that time. And you need to have a continuous creation plan. None of this, holding statements, these canned responses work. It's akin to no comment. If you're reading something that was crafted 6 months ago and it's generic and it says nothing, and you're waiting for the next press release and the next news article, it's not going to work. Pure and simple. There will be very far and few circumstances in which you will survive that type of communication. You need to be able to create content quickly. These sorts of things, from videos, images, articles, and press releases, you need to be able to produce all of these on a regular basis. It doesn't matter how big or small your organization is. If you've got exposure and it's a crisis and you've got to communicate and it's urgent, remembering these are the sorts of things that motivate you because your business and assets are at risk, you need to be able to create all of this on a regularly, hourly basis for at least a 12 to 24-hour basis. Now, I've got a... Funny enough, there's a number of people coming back challenging that process. This is the reality. If you haven't experienced it already, the news cycle gets boring very quickly. Or if it's the biggest show or the biggest news item in town, this thing could go for days, it could go for weeks or months. It could be very topical. You need to be able to continuously communicate and push out information, because this is the defensive plan, remember. You've not planned this in advance. You've got no understanding. You're in completely survival mode. This is what you need to be able to do. So if this is looking like a daunting task, it's meant to be. The reality is, the better prepared and the better understanding you are, and all of the security and crisis and emergency professionals that are on this and that I've spoken with over the years will all agree, is that you have a plan, you have the shell of a plan, but you have to have an adaptive element. And this is where you need to be able to adapt. These are the elements that you put in: the facts, the figure, the data, the people affected, your response, all of those variables that will change to a degree. Holding statements just don't work. They're canned, they're seen straight through, and if anything, you'll play right into the hands of the media and the naysayers and the anti-bloggers and the hacktivists and everyone else. You will do more damage than good in most instances. But it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all negative. You can go on the offensive. And what I mean by the offensive is being an active participant in your own funeral. Being an active participant in the outcome, being an active participant in the communication and push information. It comes down to keywords. This is why we started with the keyword process. You have to understand the basics before you start making your own menu and your concoctions. Target on the keywords. Determine what it is that the popular phrase, moniker, nom clementia, all of those terms and elements that are what the general populace is using in this particular offense or in this particular event, and focus on that. You may have one, you may have 50 keywords, but you need to target and continuously focus on that message. English and mathematics. Search engine optimization. If you're not on the first page, you don't exist. Particularly when it comes to these types of topical issues, you have to have a plan and a strategy and consistency to be able to be positioned in that area. Use key markets, use channels, use collaborators, use mavens, use social amplifiers, all of those sorts of processes that you can stand on the shoulders of giants. Use them. They need to be identified and possibly even created in advance. Things like page ranking, for example. The stronger the page rank of your page or your website or your blogs, the better chance you've got of being heard. You can't go from a page 0 to a page rank of 8 in 10 minutes. It has to be done in advance. So make sure that you've got those platforms identified, the channels available, and your content to plug into it. Test and adjust, like everything. It may not work beautifully the first time. It may require tweaking. There may be environmental issues. There may be a bunch of other things influencing, drowning you out. You need to be able to respond. It's a two-way game of table tennis or tennis. This goes back and forth. It's not simply a case of firing a volley over one side and expecting nothing to come back. You have to be able to test, adjust, and make improvements. And it's certainly not carved in stone. Reverse engineering. This is where you can find out who and what is winning the engagement, who is number 1, who is number 10, and you can reverse engineer their success. If they've already paved the way in advance and they are getting most of the airtime, they're getting most of the the talking head. They're getting most of the communications, their information that's being retweeted and recommunicated. Reverse engineer it. Using a myriad of those tools and channels and processes I spoke about previously, reverse engineer their success. Piggyback on their coattails and go after the same channel, and then overwhelm them with your own resources, your own message, your own content. And one message, 10 formats. So don't just have a single message. Have it in 10 different formats. Have it in an article, have it in a video, have it in a press release, have it in a blog, have it on a website, multi formats, and validate. It doesn't need to be the same content, because that will cause you more harm than good, but it needs to be in multiple formats. And you then need to go ahead and implement it. You can plan all you like, but you need to go out there and actually get the job done. And the problem is with too many crisis teams, and certainly committees and bureaucracy, is that they've talked this to death, and we're waiting for the legal team to approve this, and we're waiting for our press release come. Too late. You need to be able to get out there and get it done.